On this video, I want to continue the book of Job, and I have been looking at a grammatical analysis of the book of Job, looking at the grammar inductively, along with a translation and commentary. And the purpose of this is to see what the text is actually saying from the standpoint of the Hebrew. Just to lay the foundation to where we are, in chapter 6, 1 to chapter 7:21, after the first speech of Eliphaz, Job answers with his first reply. He gives a defense for his impatience. And we see this in chapter 6, 1 to 13, which is what we'll be looking at and finishing up on today. He expresses disappointment over his friends in chapter 6:14 through the end of the chapter. And then he bitterly renews his complaint against God who has assailed him. So what I'd like to do is pick up where we left off. Job admits that he has complained, but reasons that his severe agony has occasioned his complaining. He argues with Eliphaz, who wouldn't complain, he asks. He then will again cry out to God to crush him and end his suffering. So we have worked through the first 7 verses, and now we are at verses 8 and 9 as we're going to continue working our way through this book of Job, looking at the grammar. So we pick it up at verse 8 then. It reads, "Oh, that he might give to me," I think understood, "and that my request may come. Mi yitain tavo sha'alati." And then the next phrase, "V'tikvati yitain Eloah." And my desire, or the thing that I'm longing for, that God would give. Notice the phrase mi yitain is from the verb natan. It's a cow imperfect, third masculine singular. And it's really like an idiom. It would be like, who will give, and that my answer might come, something like that. But we could just translate it, oh, that God will give an answer. Oh, that he would give an answer understood, that my answer might come. And then the last second phrase, "V'tikvati yitain Elohim," and my desire, or what I am crying out for or longing for, that God would give to me. This is like the thing hoped for, the ground of hope that I'm hoping, and that is that God would just crush me, Job is saying. And then notice, as we're looking at this phrase here, yitain again is the cow imperfect, third masculine singular from Natan. It's a pay noon verb where the noon has gone into the tav by progressive assimilation. And then as we move on to verse 9, it reads, "V'yoel Eloah v'dakaeni yater yado v'vatsaeni." That is, that it would please God, and he would crush me, that God would be willing, and that he would crush me, that he would loose his hand and cut me off. So as we look at this grammatically, notice verse 9, Vayoel. Yoel is a Hifil jussive from Ya'al, third masculine singular. And I'm thinking historically it would have been a Pei Vav, probably verb, and Val Ani became, or Val El became a Yoel. And so we are looking at a Hifil stem with that O vowel here. And the reason it had probably coalesced with a Pei Vav verb. The verb is Ya'al, which means to basically Ya'al, to be willing. So here, I think he's really saying even that God would cause to be willing, and vidakeni, and he would crush me, or that he would crush me. The vav here could be a vav showing result or purpose. So as we look at this, daka here means to crush. What we're looking at is a PL imperfect, third masculine singular, from the root daka, and then the ani. Ain is the hinge, and e is your pronominal suffix, first person singular. So even that it would please God, or that God would be willing that he would crush me. And then in the next line, Yater Yado Vivatseeni, and he would loose his hand and cut me off. Notice here, Yater is the Hifil jussive, third masculine singular, from Natar, and the noon has assimilated by progressive assimilation into the top. So Yanter became Yater. Here we have the AI vowel pattern indicative of a Hifil imperfect stem. So that so what we're looking at here is a Hifil stem, third masculine, Hifil jussive, third masculine singular, from natar, to loosen or to set free. And then viavatsa ani, and that he would cut me off. Notice via daka ani is from daka, which means to cut. Excuse me. Yeah, which I went up, that he would, that God would be willing and cut me off or crush me. Actually, what we have here is another jussive, a PL jussive, third masculine singular, with the pronominal suffix in the E. So would that God be willing that he would crush me or cut me off, and he would lose his hand. Notice vayater yado vivatsaeni. He would lose his hand. Actually, the first phrase should be even that God, it would please God, and that he would crush me, and then that he would lose his hand and cut me off. Here we have another PL jussive, third masculine singular, in vatsa, again with the pronominal suffix, first person singular, in the E here, in the hinge and the ain, with the vav consecutive or vav conversive. So following this PL jussive, what he's really saying here, or let's say looking at the interpretation of these verses, God had smitten Job with a partially fettered hand, which did not result in death. Now Job wants God to unfetter his hand and smite him with full force so that he could be relieved of his misery in death. A very depressing thing that he's going through because of the pain and the suffering that Job is experiencing. So then in verse 10, Utehi od nechamati va'asalada v'chila lo yachmol ki lo hichati imri kadosh, or imre kadosh. Then should I be, or should my comfort then be, something like that. Tahi here in verse 10 is a cow jussive, third feminine singular from haya. So then let my comfort yet then be, nechamati is my comfort from nechama, in construct with e here, the pronominal suffix, first person singular. So let my comfort be, and I will exult in pain, though he does not spare me. But asalada vechela lo yachmol. The asalada is from the root salad, to exult or to rejoice. So I would rejoice from salad. Salad is the root here. It's a PL imperfect. First, it's like a cohortative. Let me rejoice. A PL cohortative, first person singular. Notice the hatev pathak and the a vowel, indicative of a PL stem. I would rejoice, exult in pain, and though he not spare me. Lo yachmol is the cow imperfect, third masculine singular from chamal. 4, ki lo chichati imre kadosh, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. Kihati here is from kachat, and it means to hide. And I think we could translate this hide or deny. It's a PL perfect, first common singular from kachat. So I have not hidden my words from the Holy One. In other words, what he's saying here in verse 10, Job, as we look at it, could find comfort in the pain of suffering if he knew that it would lead to death at this point. He is not denied, meaning he has also not disowned God in either words or actions, and has kept the demands of the Holy One. So Job would then be able to face death with the realization that he has not been unfaithful to the Holy One. Seems to be the thought pattern up to this point. So then we go on to verse 11. He talks about answering then Eliphaz that his strength and patience is just exhausted. So ma kohi ki ayachel. What is my strength that I should wait? In other words, is my strength uh, going to be like brass? So what is my strength? Uma kitsi ki a'arik nafshi. Or what is my end? That literally here, that my soul should prolong, or that I should prolong, I should put it that way, I should prolong my soul, or cause to prolong my soul. Notice as we're looking at verse 11 then, what is my strength? Ki ayahel. Ayahel is a PL imperfect, first common singular from Yahal, to wait. So what is my strength? He's saying that I should wait. And then he goes on in the next phrase, and Uma kitsi ki acharik nafshi. And what is my end that my soul, that I should literally cause to prolong my soul? That I should continue then to be patient. What is the end in what I'm going through? Acharik is a hifio imperfect, first common singular from arak, meaning to prolong. And so what Job is reasoning here with God in verse 11, notice Eliphaz has suggested that Job may yet be restored to health, and has hence challenged Job's patience and wanting him to be patient. Job does not feel that he has enough strength to keep on living and is impatient that he has not died sooner. So we're looking at deep depression at this point that Job is going through, and that the author of Job is describing. So then we come to verse 12 as he continues. Is my strength im koach avanim kochi im betsari nachush? Is my strength the strength of stones, or is strength this strength is I guess we could render it, is my strength the strength of stones? Ko avanim, ko is in construct with avanim, strength of stones. So is my strength the strength of stones? He's asking. Or is my flesh brass? Im basari nachush. And so what Job is asking here is, how long can I endure this? If he were made of stone or brass, he could face the pain of the disease which has struck him down. Since he is flesh, though, he's reasoning, like other men, his power to do so is limited. So having answered, or tried to answer, Eliphaz about the need for patience, he then comes to talk about the fact that, why didn't you pity me when I was going through this, rather than attack me and accuse me of something? So in verse 13, Ha'im ein ezrativi, is it that there is no help in me, or that literally my help is not in me? And then Vitushiya nidacha mimeni, and that sound wisdom is driven from me. So he's asking a question here. Let me just go through the grammar just a minute. Is it that there is no help in me, and that sound wisdom is driven, nidacha, from me? Nidacha is a nifal perfect, third feminine singular, from nadach, to banish. So is it that sound wisdom is banished from me? And so what Job is asking here basically is that if, what is it? In other words, my wisdom, it's like it's banished from me. And one would expect kindness or loyalty, love to a person undergoing suffering, reasons Job as he goes on in this context. A man who is suffering, like Job, and who would even be tempted under the weight of it all to forsake his fear in the Almighty, needs love, not groundless attack from his friends. And so that brings us in to verse 14 as we continue. Lamas me rehahu me re ehu, chassid, v'yirat shaddai ya'azo. That is, to the one who is ready to faint, kindness to him that is ready to faint from his friend should be chassid, kindness. Even to him who the fear of the Almighty forsakes, that is, who abandons the fear of the Almighty. Notice here, under such situations, one could be tempted, Job is saying, to even abandon the fear of the Almighty. Ya'azov is the cow imperfect, third masculine singular from Azav. And so again, the point seems to be that Job is reproaching his friends for their lack of even human kindness for one suffering. And he's going to go on to describe them in verses 14 and following. They're like dried up streams which promise water only to disappoint those depending on them. Job then boldly challenges his friends to state his sin. And this will carry us on through the rest of this chapter. But just to begin, notice what he's saying in verse 14, that you would think there would be pity. Instead of that, there's accusation. And the sad thing that happens often in life, when people go through hard times, sometimes people can be very hurtful and make accusations rather than walking in that other person's moccasins, so to speak, as they say, or walking in that other person's shoes. So this is what's going on here. And he's going to talk about how his brethren have dealt deceitfully with him as a brook and as a channel of brooks that overflow. And they are black by reason of ice, but snow hides itself. In other words, because of hot weather, snow hides itself. And what time they really become warm, they vanish. And when it is hot, they are consumed from their place. And the paths of their way are twisted, or they wind and go into the wasteland and are lost. The caravan of Tema looked, and the companies of Shiva waited for them. They were ashamed because they had hoped They came thither, they came here, I should say, unto it, and were confounded. For now you have become his. And he goes on to say, you're like these streams that in the winter look very promising, but as the sun came out, it melted away all the water and all the ice. So I'm expecting something refreshing from you as my so called friends. But like the caravans traveling come back and they find nothing but the water has dried up. And that's the way he's going to now describe his friends. So when we look at this chapter so far, what we're seeing is he's answering Eliphaz by justifying his complaints. The arrows of the Almighty have come into him. The terrors of God have hit him. And who wouldn't respond in all of this? And so he said, this is even so bad that I wish God would take me out of this pain, is what he's saying. But then he comes back and says, you ask for patience, but I'm flesh. My strength is is not brass. And I thought that you as friends would help me, but you're like the brooks that have dried up. You're not a help at all. And he's going to go on then after that to declare his innocency and he pleads to God for a just consideration. So that's the flow of thought. And what I want to do is stop here and pick up in verse 14 and following how he talks about the brooks that he's looking for water from, and they're no longer there, and looking for refreshment from his friends, and they're no longer giving it. So that's the flow of thought. And what I'd like to do is continue on our next video recording in Job, picking up in verse 14 and following, his disappointment in his friends. But I'd like to work slowly through the grammar as we do that. And if anyone's following me in the Hebrew text, we're trying to explain each word grammatically. It's a very difficult book. It's much more difficult than reading Genesis or Bereshit. And so at any rate, I hope somebody who's following along in this wonderful book of Job, it's a classic, that they would be following along in Hebrew and meditating on the text in the original languages. So thank you. And next time we'll look at the caravans coming and how that the springs of water or the wadis have dried up. There's no water. And likening that to friends that he was hoping to get comfort from, but he's not. He's only getting accusation.